Okay. All right. So I am actually going to start the meeting. We have a presentation from a group from the YMCA called Advocacy in Action. So I'm actually going to turn it over right now to Paige, Drew, and Mark. So if Drew, if you want to share your screen and get started, please feel free.
I actually have to share, Jen. It's Mark, and I think you have to enable that for me.
Sure.
Thanks much.
Okay. Can you share now?
I can.
Okay.
Thanks, Ma. Perfect. Tell me that it's up.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Perfect.
She's going to open for us.
Let's see. I can see it okay, Mark. I think we're good.
Outstanding.
Great. All right. So hi, everyone. Good morning. And thanks so much for allowing us the opportunity to join you today. My name is Paige Hughes. I am from the Alliance of New York State YMCAs, and we'll talk a little bit about what our organization is in just a few moments, but we're really excited today to present our Advocacy in Action presentation, specifically around our Safe Routes to School Student Ambassador Program. Next slide. So on our call today, again, I am Paige. I'm the Director of Healthy Living at the Alliance. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Drew Caldwell, who's our Director of Youth Development. And we also have Mark Fenton, who has been consulting with the Alliance of New York State Y since late fall of 2019 to help us really get this program off the ground. So I'm hoping he's a familiar face to many of you on the call today. So about the Alliance of New York State YMCAs. So many of you, I'm sure you're familiar with your local YMCA, probably not too far away from your homes in many cases. So really what the Alliance is we're the advocacy and public policy arm of the YMCA. We represent the interests of all 37 independently incorporated YMCAs across the state of New York. So if we're talking about here in the Capital Region, you figure one YMCA association is the Capital District YMCA, and they have multiple branches in Troy, Albany, Guilderland, Clifton Park, just to give a little bit of context to our structure. Our organization is also responsible for providing a number of other services, direct services rather, to our YMCAs, which includes board governance, strategic planning. We do the CEO searches for our YMCAs. We provide fundraising assistance and things to that nature. There's a few transitions on this slide, Mark. So a little bit of background. So in late 2019, our organization received a grant from our national organization, which is YMCA of the USA and the CDC, to identify strategies to help create healthy and active communities. And because the Alliance already had this, our roots were really in advocacy, we really like to couple that with programming. And that's really how the Safe Routes to School Student Ambassador Program was started.
Thank you, Paige. The program was started in that manner with the goal of giving students the chance to not only learn fundamental principles of healthy community design, but giving them practical experience in that manner and giving them the chance to really investigate their own local community and see how those principles applied to their own community and to their own life experiences. One of the major ways they did this was by conducting a community walk audit, which is a chance for folks to actually go on a tour of a place they use often, but with their focus on the accessibility and walkability of the space and how that might be improved or altered by some simple changes. We also hope that the students might effectively advocate to community leaders and elected officials. And we gave them the chance to do that by not only bringing in those folks to speak to the students via Zoom and other other methods, but also giving them the tools necessary to reach out to their local leaders and understand how you go about that process. We also hoped and taught them how to summarize walk audit findings in order to make sure that they could communicate what the people that participated had communicated to them, and that they could summarize and articulate the needs that the community saw to improve their walkability and access throughout the community. And finally, we also encourage them to enhance their public speaking, their critical thinking skills, and their communication skills in ways that made them a more effective advocate. The way we actually selected the students, I have the privilege of running the YMCA Youth in Government program for New York State, which that is a program of over 500 students from all across the state that's been running for 83 years, where they do a model legislature. So we already have access to a large group of students who are civic minded and lean towards being active advocates, but those weren't the only students that were allowed or did participate. So we utilized an application process with a short narrative and an advisor sponsor. So they just needed a recommendation from a teacher or adult in their community saying they could handle the process. And then they filled out a short application indicating their interests. And then we were able to recruit 14 students from 9 different school districts. And we worked with them primarily using email, Zoom, and Google Drive.
All right, so let's take a quick look at the timeline. So originally we had this very robust program, if you will, planned for our students. We started planning this in the fall of 2019. And as you can see on the panel on the left-hand side, we were really trying to make it as engaging and interactive as possible with the students. And what we were doing was working with Mark to build a curriculum, which would essentially set the students up to come to Albany in early May for what we were calling the Safe Routes to School Student Ambassador Summit. We plan to host the event at the Hampton Inn in downtown Albany so that Mark could lead our students in an actual walk audit around Sheridan Hollow. We hope to bring the students to the Capitol so they could meet their legislators, but then also get a chance to learn a little bit more about that process. But then COVID hit, so we really had to transition. So on the right, you'll see how we were really able to put our heads together and think of how can we make the shift very quickly and do it all virtually. And I think what actually worked as a benefit for us was the fact that the students, some of them were off from school for 2 weeks, some of them weren't having classes every day. So we were really able to supplement their time off with a lot of these learning goals and the content that we created with Mark. So really high level, Mark is going to talk in just a few seconds about what the program content was. But I really just wanted to give you a side-by-side of how we had to be very nimble and quick to adjust this so that we could still achieve the same deliverables at the end of the program.
So with that, I'm going to share a little bit of the actual content that they got. This is relevant, by the way. The notion of having to go fully virtual with them is relevant given, I'm a guy who served many years on a planning board in my own community. I do a lot of consulting about active transportation and land use. And I know many entities like yours are having to meet virtually and so on. And I think one of the big lessons is that it worked to have to do this virtual process with them. I'm going to share with you very briefly some of the content we shared with the kids. This will be familiar, I hope, from your work as a regional planning entity. And it makes the connection between Why the Why, which is, we think of as a national health organization, is thinking about things like land use and transportation, which is sort of in the wheelhouse of your work. And that story begins with the notion that we should be physically active. Everybody knows that national guidelines recommend we all get at least 30 minutes a day of routine physical activity. Unfortunately, most people think that has to be structured exercise, and we know as simple as walking home from school can count toward that, walking to or from school, the school trip. By the way, you'll notice a number of photos from your region that I've accumulated over the years of working with you, including previously with Jen. Sadly, we are not as physically active as recommendations suggest we should be. As few as 5% of adults and maybe 20% of adolescents meet recommendations to get that 30 to 60 minutes of daily physical activity. And we would suggest it is not just television, it's not just our sedentary jobs, but the built environment that is much more automobile oriented that has much to do with that. And that's created traumatic change. The reason there is such a thing as a Safe Routes to School program is because of the dramatic change we've seen in how kids travel to school. Just over the 30-year time period from about 1970 to 2000, the percentage of kids walking and biking to school dropped from over 40% to more like 15%. And the percent being driven by car went from close to 15% to almost 50%. And what's notable is we can anticipate with COVID, if kids are returning to school this fall, parents are going to be very dubious about having them on a school bus, we may see those single occupancy vehicle numbers just go through the roof. We may 60, 70, 80% of kids being driven to school by car, which will cause just mind-boggling traffic jams. From a public health standpoint, what's mind-boggling is over the 30 years that transportation shift has already happened, we've seen childhood obesity rates tripled. We know lots of other things influence that, such as nutritional input, but there's strong evidence that the built environment has much to do with how much physical activity both the youth and adults in America get. And we know from a good body of evidence that there are sort of 4 broad characteristics that create settings where people are more likely to walk, to bicycle, to use transit, to take what we call the active transportation modes. And that is a mix of land uses, a network of facilities for active transport, site design that is rewarding and inviting for the pedestrian and the bicyclist, and safe, accessible environments for all users. And again, all photos from the region there, from work I've done in the greater capital region here. The land use mix is obviously, and you talk about this, I'm sure you routinely address these kinds of issues, more compact development, mixed use, and having, for example, schools near homes, but lots of other factors as well. The network is not just sidewalks, but also on-street bicycle facilities and separated trails. And transit. We know that regular transit riders tend to get more physical activity. And it's the combination of land use and the network that allows the kids, for example, here in Voorheesville, to walk between the elementary school and Nichols Memorial Park. Proximity wouldn't be enough, but neither would the sidewalk or the crosswalk. You need them both. Also, when you get to a destination, it has to reward the pedestrian rather than punish them. Buildings up at the street trees, awnings, benches, these things all matter. And it's got to be safe and accessible for all users of all abilities. And I will say, as an engineer, my background is actually in engineering. We have lots of tools in the toolkit and getting increasingly sophisticated in how to build environments where pedestrians, motor vehicles, bicycles can safely navigate the same landscape. But we have to be willing to apply those tools. I'm telling you all this because this is the content the kids were presented with in some detail, actually. So we didn't try to turn them into pedestrian and bicycle experts, but we certainly wanted them to have enough skills to go out and look at their environment. And the first task we gave them was to do a photo voice assignment, which was to go out and take photos of their community, a couple of things that support, a couple that discourage, and a couple what we would call surprise them regarding bicycling, walking, and transit use. And it's called photo voice because you just take a picture and then attach a very short caption to each photo. I'm going to show you just 2 of those, just to give you a sense of how insightful the students were. Because frankly, one of the pitches we're making to you is that youth are an untapped resource, and I think we could be taking more advantage of them in our planning and land use and transportation decision making. So Angela Gray, who was in Schenectady, she shared this photo voice. She showed these images of positive things she saw, you know, the ADA accessible curb ramp, the high visibility crosswalks here with the ladder style striping, the bike sharing program, and transit. She was very clever in her photo capturing here, the multi-modes that she saw being benefited by good infrastructure, but also bad infrastructure, either sidewalks in poor repair or totally lacking. Even things like trash, kids, because they're out walking, they're close to this landscape, so they're experiencing it. We drive by at 40 miles an hour, we might not see these things. And her surprise is she actually in particular noted the alleyway network and wondered whether these alleys in the older sections of town might be appropriate walk and bike routes, as you could get students away from traffic on their routes to school. Another participant was Jack Kelly in Clifton Park. He did a really nice job. And again, similar observations, high quality sidewalk, or here the rectangular rapid flashing beacon, what engineers refer to as RRFBs, to enhance the quality of crosswalks. So very personal experience with walking that environment, but also places where there's no sidewalk at all, or where the sidewalk has not been cleared, where snow has not been removed, or where the sidewalk, when it abuts the edge of the road, ends up getting the snow pushed right onto it by the snow plowing on the road. And a surprise, his surprise was notable, a trail that connected the library to one of the elementary schools in the local Y. I think it's fair to say that the insights that the kids brought by virtue of their experience as pedestrians was really, really valuable. We also virtually taught them about the idea of a walk audit, taking others on a walk and facilitating a conversation, not telling people answers, but an act of shared discovery and problem solving. This is a technique I use very, very frequently when working with communities on comprehensive plans, long-range transportation plans, specific corridor studies. And normally it's done live, right? We go out and walk together, and we challenged the youth to think about, could you do it virtually? And we were stunned with their creativity. We also hosted a summit for them virtually over 3 meetings. We had New York State Senator Tim Kennedy out in Western New York and Justin Booth, who's the executive director of Go Bike, speak with them. We invited folks from the town of Bethlehem. Thanks to Jen's help, she connected us with Rob Leslie, the director of planning, Police Commander Hornick, and Aaron Savary, who sits on their Bike Ped Advisory Committee. And they visited with the youth on one of those meetings. And then on the third, Assembly Member Patricia Fahey and Belinda Heckler of the New York State Alliance of Wise public policy program all spoke to the kids around the role that they could play, that youth could play in making a difference in their communities. And I'll conclude by just showing you a couple of shots from Jack Kelly's actual virtual walk audit and the recommendations. He actually created a Google Doc, and many of the students did this, and they invited public community members to go on this virtual walk. So you went into the Google document, you filled in this information. He had a little introductory video where he talked about the 4 elements that they had learned about, the mix of land uses, connectivity of the network, site design, safety, and access. He showed people the route he was going to take them on in Clifton Park that connected important destinations, shopping areas, schools, recreational spaces. He then created little video clips. He went out and took small, these were 12 to 20-second video clips. You would walk a section, and then after each clip, you were asked to rate it. So you gave a score, you talked about why you rated it, and you even proposed improvements. You could say, well, that crosswalk certainly faded. We could repaint that. Maybe we need to do a better job of clearing that sidewalk. And at the end, he asked people, do you even think walkability is important? And what could we do to program more walking in our community? And this was not uncommon. These kids, these youth, I should say, had wonderful ideas around what they could do. He was very pleased with the level of engagement, the folks who took part. He connected with another advocacy group at his middle school in his town. And perhaps most notably, he wanted to move forward with this. He said, maybe we need a bicycle and pedestrian or walkability advisory committee like the one I learned about in Bethlehem. And he was going to reach out to the folks he'd met in Bethlehem about possibly replicating that. And remaining involved, I think, was sort of central to his ideas around this. And I'd conclude by saying, I think there were a couple of big takeaways. I have worked with youth before, but I was really blown away by their alacrity with technology. They were unperturbed by having to do this all virtually. They aren't bounded by what can't be done. They don't know that the MUTCD, the Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, says we can't put a crosswalk there. They just know this is where kids are. They're starting here and they're ending there, and maybe we need to think about that. They're creative, they're thoughtful, and they observe things like the bike that has to be stuck behind the building because there's no bicycle rack, or the informal path, the goat trail or desire line that the youth will wear across the fields because it's better than walking out onto the road that has no sidewalk. I would simply suggest that one of our conclusions is they are an untapped resource, and we hope that you might even be able to take advantage of them in your work going forward.
Indeed. Our students were truly impressive, and we're obviously all very proud of them. But this was not just a program that was self-contained. The goal of this program was to provide them the tools they needed to then go on to be effective advocates, partners, and participants in city planning, in their community government, and making sure that their towns are more walkable, accessible, and healthy. So the program goals, the major takeaways that we had were that this was an opportunity for students to put their advocacy skills to the test. We taught them as much as we could about being an effective advocate, but then gave them the forums and the tools necessary to really take that on in their own right. And while we did learn that attendance and engagement over virtual platforms can be difficult, it also offers its own different opportunities in that we were able to record and allow students to watch the videos of our conferences and our webinars at different times. So by making that more available, that did give them the chance to participate, even if they couldn't be there at a specific time, which meant that while they weren't always present, they were engaged. There's a lot of room for growth in this particular space, which is to say, you know, we can have as many students as we can fit in a Zoom call. There's so many different communities, so many different needs. By using the breakout room function in Zoom and other different tools, we're able to still give them those small group experiences without necessarily worrying about how large we grow. So that is an exciting aspect. But most of all, and one of the things that we really came to understand is that these students were excited, engaged, and interested in the concept of not just city planning, but traffic patterns, understanding how decisions are made at that level, and they wanted to get involved. They feel underrepresented in local government, in all forms of government, because they aren't yet of voting age in most cases, but they have a lot to say and a lot to do, and they don't come at that from a perspective of, you know, this needs to happen because this is what we think. They want to understand, they want to participate, and they want to make things better. So it really was very exciting for us to see them engage in that way, to advance their ideas, and to come at this with the understanding that this was just the start of a long-term experience, because they did understand how not tedious, but how many different steps can be involved in making even the smallest change at the local levels, and how much thought, care, and consideration was put into pretty much every regulation and decision you see every day as you're walking around town. So one of the things that we wanted to leave you with is the question of how the YMCA can help you. Are there opportunities for our, for partnership with our program, for our students to get involved at the local or state level? If you have ideas or ways that you'd like to see this advocacy play out, or chances you'd like to see our students offered. Obviously, we don't tell them what to think, but we do give them the tools to get out there and be effective advocates and partners. And so the more connections we can help them make, the more they can advocate and partner with their local communities. So that's what we wanted to leave you with, as well as the fact that we're just really glad to see that young people are really engaged and interested in how communities work and how people get around.
Thanks, Drew and Paige and Mark. If anyone has any questions, you can unmute yourself and ask, or if you'd prefer, you can also type it into the chat box. I definitely want to, thank you all for presenting today. I was really glad to be able to sit in on one of your virtual workshops and observe the students. They did such a great job. And, we've started working with a student group in Clifton Park, and they have been equally impressive. And it's really interesting listening to them. And I think that more communities and organizations should include youth, because they have a really important perspective, and they want, they're at the age, middle school, early high school. They don't drive yet, but they are getting ready to kind of decide whether or not they're going to drive or how much they want to drive. But they do want independence, and they want to be able to socialize and move about their community freely and safely. And they notice so many things in the built environment and how it is really a challenge to their freedom. And also talking to them, they are so aware of not just themselves, but when they see something, they'll say, like, imagine if you were using a mobility device or in a wheelchair. They recognize it so easily, or they know if a person didn't look like me, they wouldn't feel welcomed in this space because of A, B, C, D, E. They're super, super like in touch with that and observant, where I think, some of us as adults, as we, maybe we become kind of oblivious to some of that stuff as we get more comfortable in our behaviors and patterns. So I definitely encourage everyone to engage with them, and, to reach out to the YMCA to see how the Youth Ambassador Program can help. Jeanette, do you want me to read that, or do you want to talk?
No, you can read it.
Sure. Jeanette's a great presentation. Having the kids present this to us might have been cool. Is your plan something our community can borrow? And if not in whole, at least parts of it?
Sure. So that's a really great question, Jeanette. Thanks for that. I think our goal, and that's why we brought Mark in, was to help develop a model that we could share with other YMCA state alliances across the country. But at the same time, I don't see why that couldn't be replicated locally in smaller communities on that scale. So we'd be happy to, once we develop, we're still finalizing a few of those tools, but once we have the program guide finished, I'm happy to pass that along to Jen so she can share that with you and your team. And I'm sure at some point, Jen, we could probably get Jack or Angela or one of the local students to jump on and chat. I think it'd be interesting to their perspectives firsthand about the program.
Definitely.
They were exceptionally dedicated and gave an awful lot of time to this. Remember, they're not getting any school credit or anything. And so we had already asked them for a lot. And many of them were post walk audit going back and going to be giving community presentations, you know, try to reach out to a local planning board or school board or town or village board or council to present their recommendations. They were really an impressive batch. By the way, a quick thanks to Jen for all of your help throughout. You were really, it was great to have you involved, Jen. We really appreciate that.
Yes, thank you, Jen.
It was my pleasure. Any more questions?
Yeah, extra credit, I agree. Or community service hours. Jeanette just said maybe they should. And we actually are going to explore both of those for the program next year. It's completely reasonable that many schools have a community service obligation. And boy, I think this is certainly a form of community service. So we'd love to see them earn hours for it. So we're going to actually try to pursue that, Jeanette. That's absolutely right on the mark.
In a few cases, such as Shenandoah Hall, perhaps, alternate drop-off points may be appropriate to ease the traffic congestion at their doorstep, so to speak, and that would give them, let's say, a half mile, a quarter mile walk.
We have had success partnering with churches, indeed, which have often empty parking lots on weekdays, right? Large empty parking lots that are within a half mile of a school as a satellite pickup and drop off. That's a perfectly good idea. And we've had some success doing that in communities as part of travel to school programs. And it could have a huge influence on congestion. You're absolutely right.
Jen, this is Jen Hogan. Can you all hear me?
Yep.
Okay, great presentation. Thank you for sharing. Just to go back, you received funding from the YMCA of the USA and the CDC to run this program? Is that correct?
Correct. So YUSA gets their dollars from the CDC, and I'm pretty positive it's from the Active People Healthy Communities initiative.
Okay.
Yep.
And when the funding became available, were you the only entity who received funding for this, I guess, pilot project program that you were working on?
So I believe that, Drew, you might know the exact number. There were 20 other state alliances across the country that also got funding. However, each state has the ability to choose what they'd like to do. And I think for us, Drew is really good at programming and I'm really good at the policy end. So we kind of put our heads together and came up with this concept, and we're excited and we were happy that we were the only state to put something together like this. So everyone has a little different strategy. I think for us, this just made the most sense with our skill sets.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm happy that I was able to tune into this presentation this morning, because recently I was invited to participate on the bike and planning track for the Lifesavers Conference. And I do like this youth perspective. So it's something that I may want to follow up and talk with you about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Jen has my contact info as well as Drew and Mark.
Okay.
So I'm sure, and that goes for anyone, open invitation just to chat a little bit more about the program, or if there's any way that we can connect the local communities through the Y, we're happy to do that.
Great. Thanks so much.
Sure. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? I will work with Paige, Drew, and Mark to get a copy of their presentation so that we can include it in the notes and their contact info, so we can kind of continue to coordinate and talk about opportunities to work together. So thank you so much. If you'd like to stay for the rest of our meeting, you are welcome to, but please don't feel like you have to. So
Thanks for having us.
sure.
Thank you.
So I'm gonna okay. Oops, hold on 1 second. I just have to change the host. Mark Fenton, if you're still on, can you make me the host? Because I think I gave it to you. If you click on the 3 dots in my box, it should say make host, maybe.
I'm trying it right now, and I think you're absolutely right. Change host.
Okay.
Yep.
Now
Sorry, I didn't realize. Yeah, that's how you gave me control for the screen. Thanks so
yeah,
much.
I forgot that that's how it works. So
Yeah.
can everyone
again,
see my?
Thanks
Can
for having us. You guys
Sure.
are wonderful. Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you. Can everyone see my screen? Okay. So just an update for CDTC and reopening. Our office is currently open Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and staff is rotating, being in the office 1 day a week. We will probably continue Zoom virtual bike ped meetings for the foreseeable future. But staff is starting to, increase being in the office more. We're trying to do it in phases. So just if you have questions, if you need to come into the office, we're discouraging people from doing in-person visits. But if you need something, just please feel free to reach out, and we'd be happy to accommodate you, help you however we can. Yeah, that's about it. So Rima, I wanted to see if, do you have any slides that you want to share to talk about the Pledge to Ride?
I do have slides.
Okay.
Would you mind making me host?
Sure. Okay.
Great.
So you should be host now.
Okay. Ooh, my slides disappeared. Okay, so Bike Month is May. We typically do a bike to work challenge in the spring. This year we were actually going to kick it into early June. But of course, all of that got totally scrapped when everybody started working from home because of COVID. So we shifted gears to do just a simple Pledge to Ride campaign instead of a bike to work challenge. So I just wanted to fill you guys in on that effort. So the goal this year was to get people of all ages and abilities to ride for any reason. Just get outside and get on a bike for any reason whatsoever, recreation, errands, if you got to go to work, your mental health, whatever reason, and for all ages, including kids, because they were out of school too. Typically the bike to work was just for adults, and then there was a separate bike to school day event. So this was sort of just a catch-all. So it was structured so that people, I created a form online. People could fill out the form and pledge to ride their bikes at least once between May 1st and June 5th. And they could, I had different categories. So it's, at least once, or it was different ranges of how much they could, how frequently they would commit to riding just one time that whole month, or every day, or a couple times a week, or once a week. whatever they felt comfortable promising that they would do. We offered, like last year for the Bike to Work Challenge, we offered a social media raffle, but we limited it to just adults. I didn't want to have to get into, possible liability issues with giving prizes away to kids, but and also the type of prizes that we had were not really, appropriate for children. So we raffled off a 1-month bus pass, a 1-month membership to CDPHP Cycle, and a 1-year membership to Capital Car Share. And we also put out some messaging that encouraged social distancing while biking. So for marketing, we, through our partners at 501 New York Rideshare, we had 2 paid Facebook posts, including 1 video that promoted the pledge campaign. And we also had, CDTC also put out posts and tweets on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And some of our partners and pledgers, shared and retweeted those messages and posted their own promotional messages. So the outcome, we had 130 people pledge. Last year for Bike to Work, we had 678 people. So this was a considerably smaller campaign than Bike to Work typically is. And I should have added that we also had hundreds of Bike to School participants in 2019 as well. So this is significantly smaller. But we did have 107 social media posts using the campaign hashtag, which was 518 Pledge to Ride. Several people pledged, the people, some of the people who pledged to ride frequently, would post every time they went out. We had one person try to post every single day during the pledge period. So I did put out a post pledge survey and I got 33 responses, was about a 25% response rate. Everyone who filled out the survey reported that they rode at least once, except there was one person that did not ride because they were recovering from surgery. And about 95% of those people rode at least once a week. And many of them rode much more frequently than that. So I thought to put in this question, I was just curious to see why people were going out and getting on their bikes. 90% of the respondents reported that they got out on their bikes because of physical exercise. About 85% said they did it just for fun. Almost 60% said they did it for their mental health, especially during COVID. Not so surprising. I wish I had more of a baseline for this type of question for past events we've done, because I'm curious if the mental health reason got, would have been higher for the COVID pledge as opposed to other events. I don't know. It's too bad we won't know that. So some notable comments from the survey. One person suggested that we offer the pledge in addition to the Bike to Work Challenge every year. One person got hit by a car. She was not severely injured, but it did happen on her second commute. It happened in a roundabout, and she pointed out that we need better bike infrastructure. There was some concern about riding on trails due to inability to stay 6 feet from others. One person was promoting the idea that CDTC should support the regional Cure to Tour event. And one person lamented that there were no t-shirts that were offered. And that's all I got. So now that, so the original idea with you can take admin back now, Jen, or wait, how do I give that back to you?
You have to make me the host again. If you click
How do
on
I
the
do
3
that?
dots in the corner of my box,